In Japanese culture, the biggest taboos revolved around death. When a person died, it was imperative that you kept yourself as far away from the body as possible, unless, of course, you were one of the people who had to take care of it. And even then, you had to jump through a whole host of hoops to purify yourself from the defilement that doing so brought. But in today's story, a man throws taboo to the wind in an attempt to get to the bottom of some very strange things happening around his own father's dead body. Yokoso owashitare, and welcome back to yet another classical Japanese folktale. And if you like Japanese history, or you like Japanese culture, or you just like storytelling in general, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, because there are still plenty more of these folktales that we have to get to. And I know that there's a lot happening in the world today, but for the next few minutes, just take your cares, put them to the side for a little bit, and let's enjoy a very old Japanese folktale. Once upon a time, ima wa mukashi. In a province and a district whose names have been lost to time, there were two brothers. We don't know anything about these brothers, their names, their lineage, their occupations, nothing. The only thing that the story tells us is that both of them were intelligent and fearless men, and one of them especially so, as you will see. But our story begins with death. Specifically, the father of these two men died suddenly. The story doesn't mention how, but for our purposes, that's not particularly important. What is important, however, is that ever since Buddhism took hold in Japan, the ancient Japanese disposed of bodies by cremating them. Now, of course, you couldn't just throw a body into a fire and call it good. There were protocols for these things, a funeral, rites, dignities that the dead deserved. And that was especially true if you were sending off one of your parents who were to be given the utmost respect in Japanese culture. And so, after the father of these two brothers passed away, they determined to do their filial duty and see to it that their father was given a proper send-off. But there was just one problem. For whatever reason, there was a holdup in making proper arrangements for the funeral and the cremation, and it would have to be delayed for a few days. That's unfortunate. In the meantime, though, the brothers had to do something. They couldn't just leave him lying around the place. No. Instead, they placed their father's body in a coffin, put a lid on that coffin, and then placed it inside of a small hut that was a good distance removed from any place that people frequented regularly. As mentioned in the intro, there was nothing more ritually defiling than a dead body, and it was of utmost importance that you deal with one as little as possible. Hence, they put him in a hut far removed from where anybody is going to generally be. And now, while this situation wasn't ideal, certainly, for now, this was the best that they could do while they waited for the actual day of the funeral. And so, the next few days passed with nothing worthy of mention. The brothers carried on with their lives, but as always, with the fact of their father's hastily interred body at the back of their minds. But one day, something unusual happened. That morning, the brothers were greeted by a neighbor who lived nearby and who had showed up at their house with a congenial but a concerned expression. The neighbor explained that he had a message for them, and when the brothers and this neighbor were together, the brothers asked the neighbor the reason for his visit. When asked, the neighbor's brow furrowed, and the concern in his eyes grew deeper as he told them, with his voice low and serious, "Last night around midnight, I happened to look in the direction of your home and saw a very faint light. I looked a little closer and realized that there was something glowing in the hut where your father's body is interred. It made me uneasy, and while I don't know if there's anything you can do about it, I figured I should at least let you gentlemen know about it." The brothers were shocked. Since they weren't living in the capital, it's safe to presume that they were part of a fairly close-knit agricultural community where everyone knew everyone else. They knew who this neighbor was, and that he wasn't the type to make up stories. If he said he saw something strange, then it was in their best interest to believe him. After taking a moment to process this very disconcerting news, they thanked the neighbor for informing them, and he simply nodded his head, turned around, and then went home. The brothers then turned to each other and began discussing. The older brother was the first to speak. Okay, let's start from what we know. This is either one of two things. Either Dad's spirit has turned into something unusual, or it's something else that's breaking into the hut and disturbing his rest. Either way, we do need to investigate this a little bit more. The younger brother nodded in agreement, and after thinking for a few seconds, he hit on an idea. I know what to do, but honestly it's a little bit crazy, so I'm going to spare you the details for now. But just trust me, okay? Just be ready to come running into the hut with a lit torch when I shout for you. Wait. What? The older brother was a bit indignant. Was he serious? If it was that crazy of an idea, shouldn't he, as the older brother, know what it was? He was about to voice his protest, but then he stopped. His younger brother was a capable man and had proven that he was trustworthy in the past. If he felt like keeping the plan secret was important, then it probably was, even from him. Given that they were dealing with the body of their deceased father along with something supernatural, it's possible that the plan was just plain crazy, and if the older brother knew about it, he might not agree to it, and since he couldn't think of any other good ideas, maybe he should just trust his younger brother in this case. Fine then. Perhaps a little bit of crazy was exactly what they needed to outsmart something supernatural. After considering all of this, the older brother then agreed and promised to do as the younger instructed. And so, trusting in the younger brother's plan, they waited. The hours passed and nightfall came. When it had become completely dark out, the younger brother turned to the older brother and reminded him of the plan. When I shout for you, come running into the hut as fast as you can with a torch. The older brother nodded, and then the younger brother grabbed a sword and disappeared into the darkness, heading straight for the hut where their father's body was being kept. Now the younger brother moved carefully and quietly. He didn't know exactly what was causing problems, and it's possible that it could already be there, lying in wait to snatch any unsuspecting passers-by. Hopefully, that wasn't the case. When he arrived at the hut and stealthily stuck his head inside, everything seemed normal. No ghost lights or creatures hiding in the corner, nothing. He then went all the way inside and was relieved to find that whatever was haunting the place hadn't shown up yet, or so it seemed. There was only the coffin sitting in the middle of the room. Now, here is where things get a little strange due to some cultural differences. The first thing that the younger brother did was remove the lid from the coffin, flip it upside down, and then put it back. He then stripped all of his clothing from him, unbound his hair, and then he stretched himself out on top of the inverted coffin lid in such a way as to have his sword close to him, but also hidden. Then he shut his eyes. Now, I couldn't tell you why he felt the need to flip the lid around, or how exactly he was able to keep his sword hidden. Well, keep one sword hidden at least. But it's clear that the younger brother was trying to make it look like he was a dead man. Unbinding one's hair and removing the clothing were apparently part of preparing a body for a funeral. He was laying a trap, with him passing himself off as a corpse as bait. And so he lay there for hours, naked, eyes closed, with the body of his father inches away and only separated by an upturned coffin lid. Even given the lateness of the hour and the fact that he was keeping his eyes closed, in such unbelievable circumstances, there was no way that this man was going to fall asleep. Again, if you remember how there was nothing more taboo than being near death, it's not surprising that the younger brother felt like he couldn't divulge this plan to the older brother. This was absolutely insane, according to their culture, especially since they didn't even know what was causing the issue. For all they knew, it was something extremely powerful and extremely dangerous, and there was no guarantee that this would work, or that the younger brother would even make it out alive. But the younger brother was convinced that he could get to the bottom of the mystery and maybe even stop it altogether, but this is what he needed to do for that purpose. Thus, just as the younger brother was thinking that midnight had arrived, he became aware of a soft light that was now shining ever so slightly through his eyelids. It was here. Not wanting to alert it to the fact that he was alive, but wanting to get a look at this thing, he then opened his eyes just a crack, just a slit, and did his best to peer through both his eyelashes and the dark at whatever this thing was. He had just enough time to register that this light was a pale blue glow, before suddenly the light faded out, and all was plunged into darkness once again. Why did it go dark? Did it know? Had opening his eyes somehow alerted it? The younger brother continued lying there, holding his breath, partly to sell the act of being dead, but partly because fear compelled him to remain absolutely still. After some very tense seconds, the glow came back. Through his still barely open eyes, the younger brother was able to see that the light was coming from above the latticework on the ceiling. Whatever this thing was, it was agile. And although he couldn't see it clearly, from the sounds it made as it moved around above him, he got the sense that it was fairly large. With the glow continuing, he heard what sounded like something removing the latticework from the ceiling, followed by the sounds of something heavy dropping to the floorboards with a loud thud a few seconds later. Then, footsteps that advanced toward him in tandem with the glow. When it got to the edge of the coffin, it stopped. This thing, whatever it was now standing just at his feet. A second later, the younger brother felt something grab onto the lid that he was lying on and begin to hoist it, like it was going to set it off to the side. This was his chance. Its hands, or whatever it had, were occupied, and it was distracted. In an instant, the younger brother sprang up, sword in hand, and wrapped his arms around this thing in a vice-like bear hug. He then shouted at the top of his lungs, "I got him! Ah!" He then took his sword and drove it into what he assumed was this thing's side with all of the force that he could muster. He felt the entirety of the blade, all the way up to the handguard, pierce deep into this thing, and a second later, the glow died out. As promised, the older brother had been waiting outside for the signal, and when he heard the younger brother shout, he immediately lit a torch and ran into the hut. Seconds later, he had thrown open the sliding door and dashed inside, holding the torch aloft to let him see. He couldn't believe the scene before his eyes. His brother was naked, his hair undone, and bear-hugging the culprit with one arm, while the other was gripping the handle of a sword that had skewered it. By the light of the torch, both brothers could now see clearly what they had caught. It was a huge, hairless Kusainagi, and it was clearly dead. And then, the story proper ends by explaining that the brothers were both so stunned that they couldn't even speak. But yeah, that is actually the end of the story proper. Now, if you're curious as to what exactly a Kusainagi is, I'm afraid I can't actually tell you. This is a word whose meaning has been lost to time, though it seems likely that it refers to some kind of common Japanese wild animal with paws, possibly a Japanese badger, aka a mujina, or a tanuki, aka a raccoon dog. And like so many of Japan's wild animals, they were believed to have magic powers, and sometimes they enjoyed scaring people and playing pranks on them. See the previous story for more information about that. But while a giant, glowing, hairless woodland creature might be fascinating to us, that's not the part that the writer of this story chooses to dwell on when he is giving his own opinion at the end of this story. Whoever recorded this goes on to tell us that he can hardly believe that anyone would do what this younger brother did. Putting yourself in a place that was already so feared by the average Joe because of the taboo is incredible enough. But again, the younger brother had no idea what he was going to see in that hut. The writer says that because all of this was happening around a dead person, most people would have guessed that the culprit was an oni. And oni are extremely dangerous. See some of the previous videos for more information about that. But not only did this man confront what was quite possibly a very dangerous creature, but he also did so naked, in the dark, while simply lying there, keeping his nerves under control the whole time until he could grab it and then stick it with his sword. I mean, true, after learning that it was only a Kusainagi, both of the brothers were probably very relieved. But they had no way of knowing beforehand what it was, and likely had assumed the worst. And for the younger brother to come up with and go through with such a crazy plan, that is a very rare kind of man, and thus is it said that this Kusainagi got itself killed for a very silly reason indeed. And so that is actually the end of the story. So, if you did find that story amusing, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel because there are still plenty more of these stories to get through. And feel free to share with anybody who you think might be interested, people who are interested in Japanese culture or history, or who like scary stories, or who just need something to put on in the background while they're doing, menial chores or they're stuck in traffic or what have you. That's how I consume most of my YouTube. But that is where I'm going to end it. So if you've been watching all the way up to the end here, I do thank you sincerely. Ito ureshu koso hamberi kere. And hopefully, we will see you next time for yet another story about a man who sees some very strange things happen around a funeral and a grave, highlighting exactly why you should stay away from those places and let the dead rest in peace. Thank you so much one more time, guys. We'll see you later. Goodbye.